Venezuelan authorities have presented new evidence related to Operation Gideon. The Brazilian Chamber of Deputies has received a new request to initiate impeachment proceedings against President Jair Bolsonaro. China began its most important political event of the year on Thursday after a 2-month delay because of the coronavirus pandemic. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, I'm Katrina Goss. Venezuelan Vice President of Communications Jorge Rodriguez presented new evidence related to Operation Gideon. The new evidence directly links the criminal Colombian gang Los Panchenchas to the armed incursion into Venezuela. According to Rodriguez, Venezuela has reported operations in mercenary camps operated by the gang in areas it controls along the north coast of Colombia, including Barranquilla, Riohacha and La Guajira. In all these spots, events related to the attacks on Venezuela have been developed.
Todos esos audios también nos han llegado no solamente por filtraciones.
All these audios have also reached us, not only through infiltrations, but also through the indignant voices of the Colombian armed forces that know these barbaric allegiances between these deserters, these traitors, who are armed and trained in regions of northern Colombia and linked to Colombian drug trafficking, the drug trafficking that the Colombian government supposedly fights, the drug trafficking that the DEA supposedly claims to combat, and all of the operations that Donald Trump has announced against drug trafficking. It seems not only that they have not had any positive effect in the fight against drugs, but on the contrary, what they have done is strengthen the powerful drugs trafficking clans that exist in northern Colombia.
And the Venezuelan Vice President of Communications also presented part of the recorded testimony of U.S. mercenary Luke Denman, confirming the links between opposition lawmaker Juan Guaido and the Silvercorp USA security firm.
I don't think that those two things were necessary to hold the third party accountable. I believe that's the whole reason that Guaido picked a third party, is so he could try to shift the blame onto them.
The Brazilian Chamber of Deputies has received a new request from social movements to initiate impeachment proceedings against President Jair Bolsonaro. Our correspondent Brian Meir has the details.
At 11 o'clock this morning, a coalition of over 400 civil society organizations and political parties filed an official impeachment procedure against far-right Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro for putting people's lives at danger during the coronavirus pandemic. Now, there are already impeachment requests against Bolsonaro sitting in Brazilian Congress, and Bolsonaro has recently allocated 80 billion reais in funding for pet projects from all of the different congressmen in order to try and buy their support against the impeachment. But what makes this request different from all of the others that preceded it is that it's part of an actual social movement, and the idea is that together with this impeachment request, there's other activities that are going to happen. First of all, Congressman Paulo Teixeira also introduced last week a constitutional amendment which would immediately call for reholding the elections in case of impeachment. The PT believes that it isn't a step forwards to remove Jair Bolsonaro and put military General Hamilton Mourão, who is his current vice president, in power. So part two of the fight is to cancel the 2018 presidential elections for fraud, and there's ample proof that fraud took place. Finally, this impeachment request is connected to a national campaign called Out with Bolsonaro, in which all of the civil society groups that joined in the impeachment request today will work to pressure people in their communities, to educate the people about the dangers that Bolsonaro is wreaking on Brazilian society through his disastrous handling of the coronavirus pandemic. And the hope is with that, his popularity levels will be pushed down below the 20% mark. Currently, he's polling at around 27%. And it's of the opinion of the PT and the partner organizations that the impeachment won't be politically viable until this number drops below 20.
Brazil has now reported more than 290,000 positive COVID-19 cases, the third highest total in the world. Peru has reported the second highest number of cases in Latin America at over 100,000, while it's seen more than 3,000 COVID-19 deaths, despite being one of the earliest countries in the region to introduce lockdown measures. Meanwhile, Mexico has confirmed more than 56,000 cases and over 6,000 fatalities. Chile, the third most affected country in South America, has reported over 57,000 cases and a death toll of almost 600. China has committed to assisting Caribbean countries affected by COVID-19. Tian Qi, ambassador of China to Jamaica, said on Wednesday that the Chinese collaboration will take the form of material and technical assistance, the sharing of lockdown experiences and treatment solutions, and facilitate the purchase of medical supplies. The ambassador also stated that China will actively expand all-round practical cooperation with Caribbean countries in areas like trade and investment, and strengthen communication and coordination in international and regional organizations.
Video conference had an interactive question and answer session that allowed participants to express their doubts and concerns to the Chinese experts.
And on Wednesday, China delivered an important donation of medical supplies and financial resources to assist Cuba's battle against the novel coronavirus. During a ceremony at the Cuban Health Ministry, Chinese ambassador to Havana, Chen Shi, noted that the recent address by Chinese President Xi Jinping during the 73rd session of the World Health Assembly offered important guidelines for the future fight against the pandemic. Ambassador Chen delivered the materials and funds donated by the Chinese Red Cross to the Cuban authorities, including COVID-19 test kits, face masks and surgical gloves, among other personal protective equipment.
This year marks the 60th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between China and Cuba. In the midst of the growing uncertainties and an ever-changing world, the importance of the traditional and fraternal friendship that unites us has been further highlighted. We will continue to support the efforts of the Cuban people in the fight against COVID-19, and we are ready to work together to promote exchanges and cooperation in various sectors. We are convinced that Cuba will overcome this epidemic and continue with firm steps in the construction of socialism. China has been an example of how to act in an area as complex as the epidemic, contributing experiences, providing resources, and sharing its experiences as the first country that was subjected to the epidemic. We followed the statements of the Chinese president, we support them, and we know that they will be a faithful reflection of what China represents for the world in this great battle.
More stories coming up after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. China began its most important political event of the year on Thursday after a 2-month delay because of the coronavirus pandemic. The annual session of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference was inaugurated at the Great Hall of the People in Beijing by Chairman Wang Yang, who presented a report on the activities of the political advisory body. President Xi Jinping and other top political leaders attended the meeting and held 1 minute's silence in tribute to the martyrs who died fighting COVID-19 and all compatriots who have lost their lives to the disease. The chairman delivered a work report to the political advisors who have gathered to discuss major domestic political, economic and social issues and make proposals.
The CPPCC should organize special and political consultation-based standing committee meetings focusing on securing a solid victory over the battle against poverty, establishing a long-term mechanism to address relative poverty, provide consultations and advice on the compilation of the 14th five-year plan, which aims to advance national economic and social development, and carry out themed consultation to facilitate innovative cooperation in the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau Greater Bay Area and promote the cultural progress while implementing the rural revitalization strategy.
And China's National Health Commission reported 2 new coronavirus cases this Thursday. One of the 2 new cases was identified in Guangdong province and was imported, while the other was locally transmitted in Shanghai. According to the Commission, a total number of over 1,700 imported cases have been reported since the outbreak of the pandemic, with only 43 remaining in hospitals. In total, China has reported more than 82,000 novel coronavirus cases, over 4,000 deaths, and more than 78,000 recoveries. US President Donald Trump is considering hosting an in-person G7 meeting in June, despite the high prevalence of active COVID-19 cases in the United States. The summit scheduled for June was cancelled in March and was to be replaced with a video conference due to the novel coronavirus pandemic. However, Trump posted on Twitter on Wednesday that he was considering a face-to-face meeting of G7 members in Washington, D.C., adding that it would be a symbol of the United States and other countries seeking to return to normal. The US has reported the highest number of COVID-19 cases and deaths in the world, with over 1.1 million cases still active.
Virtual meeting.
First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, has announced new measures to ease COVID-19 lockdown restrictions starting May 28th. Scottish residents will now be allowed to conduct outdoor activities such as sports and travel within their local area, while schools will reopen in August. The First Minister highlighted that the measures are a cautious set of steps aimed at improving people's well-being, restarting the economy and restoring normality and safety. Scotland has registered more than 14,000 coronavirus cases and a death toll of over 2,000. Meanwhile, overall numbers for the United Kingdom stand at more than 250,000 cases and over 36,000 deaths, although various reports have noted that the official figures fall far short of the reality. The Italian government has announced that all airports will be reopened from June 3rd. The announcement was made by the Italian Minister of Infrastructure and Transport on Wednesday. The measure seeks to reinforce the plan launched by the Italian authorities to boost the country's tourism industry and economy. Italy has started easing its lockdown restrictions, but the government has warned that social gatherings and parties could favour a new outbreak of the coronavirus. Italy has more than 60,000 active cases, while its death toll stands at more than 32,000. Russian authorities reported more than 8,000 new COVID-19 cases this Thursday. Russia has now reported a total of over 317,000 novel coronavirus cases, representing the second highest number in the world. Its COVID-19 death toll stands at more than 3,000. Moscow is the epicenter of the outbreak, with the vast majority of cases. Meanwhile, more than 7 million tests have been conducted across the country, and over 92,000 people have recovered from the virus. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has stated that the state of emergency in Tokyo and its surrounding regions could be lifted as early as next week if the number of new coronavirus cases continues to fall.
As for the Kanto region of Tokyo and 3 other prefectures, as well as Hokkaido, the state of emergency continues. But new infection cases are falling and pressure on medical provision system is improving. Next week, as soon as the 25th, we will ask experts for their evaluation, and if the current situation continues, I believe a lifting of the state of emergency may be possible.
And we're taking one final break now, but stay with us for more. Welcome back to From the South. The Arab League has condemned the Israeli plan to annex parts of the West Bank, describing the initiative as a new war crime against the Palestinian people. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said cabinet discussions will begin on July 1st regarding extending Israeli sovereignty to Jewish settlements in the West Bank and the annexation of the Jordan Valley. Meanwhile, Palestinians have expressed outrage at Israel's plans to seize further Palestinian land and stressed that any such moves will make peace impossible. Arab League foreign ministers condemned the move during an emergency meeting on the coronavirus pandemic. And the European Union's representative to the West Bank and the Gaza Strip also condemned the Israeli regime's plans.
We are also here to demonstrate our solidarity with the Palestinian people in the context of the threat of annexation. And we note with utmost concern the provision as communicated on the 17th of May when the new Israeli government was sworn in, that parts of the West Bank, of the occupied West Banks, may be annexed. As you know, this runs counter to international law, violates existing agreements, and is not in line with international Security Council resolutions and Council conclusions of the European Union.
Likewise, Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Shataya stated that the annexation would destroy any chances of a two-state solution sought by Palestinians and supported by the majority of the international community.
We are going to be committed to reaching a peaceful solution for a two-state solution, which does enjoy a Palestinian national consensus, it does enjoy a regional consensus, and it does enjoy an international consensus. Israel, by threatening or by announcing this annexation, Israel does violate international law, and Israel does violate all agreements that has been signed with us, whether it is political agreement, economic agreement, security agreement, legal agreement, all agreements that we signed with Israel has been violated constantly in a systematic way. And this annexation has to do with the destruction of a future possibility of a Palestinian state.
The Iraqi intelligence service announced the arrest of Abdel Nasser Qardash on Wednesday, a top official of the ISIS terrorist organization. According to a statement, Qardash was the candidate to succeed Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi to lead ISIS. The intelligence agency also added that the terrorist was head of security in Syria and Iraq, making him the highest-ranking ISIS terrorist to be taken into custody. Former ISIS leader Baghdadi was killed in October 2019 during a military operation in the Idlib province of northwestern Syria. The latest raid that led to the capture and arrest of Qardash comes a month after Iraq's former intelligence chief, Mustafa al-Kadhimi, became the country's prime minister. In recent weeks, Iraqi militias have denounced that ISIS was seeking to reorganize in Iraq with the complicity of the United States. Cyclone Amphan has caused extensive damages in India and Bangladesh. Authorities of both countries informed that more than 80 people have been killed, while communications, power lines and housing infrastructure have been severely damaged. More than 350,000 residents of coastal areas and other communities at risk were evacuated, with fears that the movement and crowding of people in evacuation centres could further fuel coronavirus infections. According to the Africa Centres for Disease Control and Prevention, the COVID-19 death toll across the continent has reached 3,000. The number of confirmed COVID-19 cases in Africa has surpassed 90,000, of which more than 38,000 patients have recovered from the virus. In terms of the number of fatalities, North Africa has the highest figures, with Egypt reporting almost 700 deaths and Algeria over 500. South Africa has reported the highest number of cases in the continent at more than 19,000. Namibia, Seychelles, Eritrea, Mauritius and Tanzania have not reported any new confirmed COVID-19 cases in more than 10 days. The Nigeria Centre for Disease Control on Wednesday announced 284 new cases of COVID-19 in the country, bringing the total to over 6,600. The centre also reported 8 new COVID-19 fatalities, bringing the death toll to 202. The health agency explained that most of the patients to have died from COVID-19 had other underlying illnesses. The latest cases were confirmed across 13 states of the country. Nigeria is the 5th worst hit nation in the continent and the most affected in West Africa. At least 300 people were killed on Wednesday in fresh clashes in South Sudan. According to local authorities, dozens of homes in Jonglei state were destroyed, warehouses were raided, and women and cattle were abducted. UN Special Representative for South Sudan, David Shearer, denounced the violence and stressed that while the politically motivated conflict has diminished in South Sudan, intercommunal fighting has increased, causing suffering for families who are trying to rebuild their lives after years of civil war. Some 800 people are believed to have been killed in such clashes in the oil-rich East African country. Now we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Katrina Goss and thank you for watching.